The night Wade Mercer pulled his rifle on 5 drunk ranch hands wasn't the night his life fell apart. It was the night he finally admitted he had something worth losing again. The ghost rancher of Red Hollow Ridge, a man who'd spent 5 years talking to nobody but cattle and shadows, now stood between an armed mob and a Chinese woman the whole frontier wanted gone. One wrong word and he'd lose everything: the ranch, his reputation, maybe his life. But as rain hammered the dust and Leon's terrified eyes met his through the darkness, Wade realized the cold truth. He'd already chosen her over all of it. If you want to see how a broken man and an outsider nobody wanted became the most dangerous alliance the frontier ever saw, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The ranch house sat like a rotting tooth against the Wyoming horizon, half swallowed by sagebrush and failure. Wade Mercer stood on the sagging porch, squinting through the morning haze at fences that hadn't been properly mended in 3 years. 42 years old, and he looked 60. The sun had carved deep lines around his eyes, and his hands, once steady enough to break a wild Mustang or split a pine log clean through, now shook slightly when he thought nobody was watching. He wasn't watching them now. He was watching the dust cloud rising from the eastern road. "That'll be Elias," he muttered to the brown mare tied near the water trough. The horse flicked an ear but didn't bother looking up. Nobody got excited about visitors anymore. Visitors meant trouble, or charity, or both. Wade had been alone on the Red Hollow Ridge Ranch for 5 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Not that he was counting. Sarah had died in the winter of 1878, pneumonia that turned her lungs to stone, while the nearest doctor sat 3 days' ride away in Cheyenne. By the time Wade made it back with medicine, she was already cold. The ranch died with her bit by bit. First, the hired hands drifted off. No woman meant no decent meals, no mended clothes, no reason to stick around when a man could barely pay wages anyway. Then the cattle started disappearing, either to rustlers or to Wade's own negligence. He'd stopped keeping proper count. The vegetable garden Sarah had loved turned to weeds. The barn roof sprouted holes. And Wade himself became something less than a man, more like a function. Wake up, feed animals. Check fences, sleep, repeat. The townspeople called him the Ghost of Red Hollow Ridge. He'd heard the nickname once while buying ammunition at Patterson's general store. 2 ranch hands had been snickering near the pickle barrel, not realizing Wade was 1 aisle over. "You see the ghost lately?" "Mercer? Nah. Heard he don't even come to town no more. Just sends old Elias with a list." "Man's already dead, just too stubborn to lie down." Wade had set his money on the counter without a word and walked out. He didn't correct them because they weren't entirely wrong. Now Elias's wagon rattled into the yard, pulled by 2 mules that looked as weathered as their owner. Elias Pruitt was 70 if he was a day, built like a fence post, with a beard that had gone from gray to pure white sometime in the last decade. He'd been Sarah's uncle, which made him the only person Wade could still stand to be around for more than 5 minutes. "Wade," Elias called, pulling the mules to a halt. "Got something for you." "Didn't ask for nothing." "Well, you're getting it anyway." Elias climbed down with the careful movements of a man whose knees had quit cooperating years ago. "You can't keep going like this. Place is falling apart." "You're falling apart." Wade said nothing. It was a conversation they'd had before, in various forms. Elias would suggest hiring help. Wade would refuse. Elias would leave. The cycle would repeat a month later. But this time, Elias walked around to the back of the wagon and spoke to someone Wade couldn't see. "Come on out. He don't bite. Barely talks neither, so don't take it personal." A woman emerged from the wagon bed. Wade's first thought was that she looked like she'd break in a strong wind. Small frame, thin arms, wearing a faded blue dress that had been patched so many times it was more patch than original fabric. Black hair pulled back tight, and eyes, dark, careful eyes that took in the ranch, the house, Wade himself, all in about 3 seconds. She was Chinese. That much was obvious. And that meant trouble. "This is Leanne Hua," Elias said, pronouncing it carefully. "Leanne Hua. She needs work. You need help. Seems simple enough to me." Wade stared at his old friend. "You out of your damn mind?" "Probably, but I'm also right." Elias gestured at the ranch. "Look around, Wade. You're 6 months from losing this place entirely. Bank's already been sniffing around asking about back payments. You need someone who can cook, clean, mend, help with the animals. I need a ranch hand, not a..." Wade stopped himself, but the woman's expression had already shifted. Not hurt, exactly. More like she'd expected it. She can do ranch work too, Elias said quietly. Grew up on a farm in California before things went bad. She's got nowhere else to go, Wade. And you ain't exactly drowning in options, neither. Wade looked at Leanne again. She stood perfectly still, that small cloth bag clutched in both hands. Waiting. He recognized that kind of waiting, the kind where you've learned not to expect much, so disappointment doesn't hit as hard. Can you cook? He asked. She nodded. Can you work from sunup to sundown without complaining? Another nod. Town's gonna give you hell. Give me hell. You understand that? This time she spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. I understand. Her English was good. Barely an accent. That surprised him, though he didn't let it show. Fine, Wade said, already regretting it. Bunkhouse is around back. Roof leaks in 2 places, but it's better than the barn. Meals are whatever you can scrape together from the pantry. Work starts at dawn. You steal anything, you're gone. You bring trouble here, you're gone. We clear? Clear, Leanne said. Leanne, my son. Elias looked like he wanted to say something about Wade's welcoming speech, but he was smart enough to keep quiet. Instead, he helped Leanne down from the wagon and grabbed her bag. I'll show her where things are, Elias said. You just try not to scare her off in the first 24 hours, all right? Wade grunted and turned back toward the barn. He had work to do, and standing around talking wasn't getting it done. But as he walked away, he heard Elias's low voice carrying across the yard. Don't mind him. He's been alone too long. Forgot how to act human. Wade almost turned around to argue, but he didn't, because Elias was right. Again. By evening, Wade had almost convinced himself that hiring Leanne was a terrible mistake. He'd spent the day checking fence lines in the south pasture, and when he returned to the house just after sunset, he found the place transformed. Not literally. The walls were still the same sun-bleached wood, the floor still creaked in all the same places. But it felt different. The smell hit him first. Something cooking, actual food, not the half-burned beans and stale coffee that had been his diet for months. He pushed open the door and stopped. The kitchen table had been scrubbed clean. The dishes that had been piling up in the basin for God knows how long were washed and stacked. The floor had been swept, and Leanne stood at the stove stirring something in the old cast-iron pot Sarah used to use. She turned when she heard him enter. I found potatoes in the cellar and some salt pork. I made stew. Wade stood there like an idiot, hat still on, unable to form words. There's more, Leanne continued, gesturing toward the bedroom. I mended your shirts. 3 of them had tears, and I found blankets in the chest. They needed airing out, but they're still good. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. She met his eyes directly. You hired me to work. This is work. She was right, technically, but something about it felt wrong. Not the work itself, but the feeling it created. Walking into a house that didn't feel dead, smelling food that someone had made with care, seeing evidence that another human being existed in this space. It felt too much like before. I'll eat outside, Wade said abruptly. Oh, I can bring... No, I always eat outside. Habit. It was a lie and they both knew it, but Leanne didn't challenge him. She just nodded and spooned stew into a bowl. Wade took it and retreated to the porch. He sat on the steps, same place he'd sat for 5 years, eating alone while the sun bled out across the ridge. The stew was good. Better than good. It had actual flavor, and the potatoes were cooked perfectly, and the salt pork had been seasoned with something he couldn't identify, but tasted like it might be worth living for. He hated it. Not the food. The feeling. The dangerous, stupid feeling that maybe things could be different. Through the window, he could see Leanne moving around the kitchen, cleaning up. She was humming something, a tune he didn't recognize, soft and low. It was the first music that House had heard in half a decade. Wade finished his stew and set the bowl on the porch rail. Then he walked out toward the barn, where the horses at least didn't make him feel anything complicated. The first week passed in a strange rhythm. Leanne worked harder than any ranch hand Wade had ever hired, and she did it without complaint. She was up before dawn, starting coffee and biscuits while Wade fed the animals. By the time he came in from morning chores, breakfast was ready. She never tried to make conversation, never asked questions, never did anything except work. And somehow, that made it worse, because Wade found himself noticing things. The way she braided her hair before starting heavy work. The careful way she handled tools, like someone who'd been taught to make things last. The fact that she sang quietly while doing dishes. Always the same unfamiliar melody. He noticed that she favored her right leg slightly when she walked. That her hands were calloused in ways that meant she'd done hard labor before. That she startled easily at loud noises but never showed fear. Just a quick freeze and then back to normal. He noticed too much. On the 8th day, Wade rode into town for supplies. He'd been putting it off, but the ranch was out of flour and salt and a dozen other necessities. He tied his horse outside Patterson's general store and walked in, already dreading the interactions to come. Marcus Patterson stood behind the counter, round-faced and suspicious. "Mercer, heard you hired yourself some help. News travels fast. News about a white rancher hiring a Chinese woman? That news travels like lightning." Patterson leaned on the counter. "She cooking for you? Washing your clothes? What exactly is she doing out there?" Wade's jaw tightened. "Ranch work, same as anyone." "Right, ranch work." Patterson's tone made it clear what he thought about that. "You know Vernon Hale's been asking about you. Seems he's got concerns about the kind of example you're setting." Vernon Hale. Of course. The biggest rancher in 3 counties, a man who'd made his fortune buying up failed homesteads and consolidating land, a man who thought his money made him king of the frontier. "Hale can keep his concerns to himself," Wade said. "I need flour, salt, coffee, and ammunition. You gonna sell it to me or not?" Patterson hesitated, then shrugged. "Your money's spent same as anyone's. But don't say I didn't warn you. People are talking. People always talk." Wade paid for his supplies and loaded them onto his horse. As he worked, he heard voices from the saloon across the street. Ranch hands drinking their wages away, probably. Their laughter had an edge to it, the kind that meant someone was the butt of a joke. The ghost rancher's got himself a little China doll now. Probably keeps her locked in the house, bet she ain't seen daylight. Or maybe she's hexed him. You know how those people are. Wade's hand stilled on the flour sack. He should keep walking, should ignore it. Getting into fights wouldn't help anything. But then one of them said something that made the others roar with laughter, something crude about what a lonely man might do with a woman who couldn't complain to anyone. Wade was across the street before he consciously decided to move. He pushed through the saloon doors. 4 men sat at a corner table, all of them working for Vernon Hale's spread. The one who'd been talking, a thick-necked bastard named Cobb, looked up with a grin that died when he saw Wade's expression. "We got a problem, Mercer." "You got a problem," Wade said quietly. "You mention her again, we're going to have a different conversation. One that involves your teeth and the floor." Cobb stood up. He had 50 pounds on Wade and 20 years less wear. "That a threat?" "It's a fact." The saloon had gone quiet. Everyone watching. Wade knew this was stupid, knew he was outnumbered and outmatched and making enemies he couldn't afford. He didn't care. Cobb took a step forward. Wade didn't move. Then a voice from the doorway. "Gentlemen, is there a problem here?" Sheriff Tom Bradshaw. 60 years old, practical as a hammer, and one of the few men in town Wade still respected. He stood in the entrance, hand resting casually on his gun belt. "No problem, Sheriff," Cobb said, though his eyes never left Wade. "Just having a conversation about employment practices. Seems Mercer here has some unusual ideas about who's fit to work a ranch. And seems like you boys have some unusual ideas about minding your own business," Bradshaw said. "Wade, get your supplies and go home. Cobb, sit down and shut up before I decide public drunkenness is worth a night in jail." Wade held Cobb's stare for another 3 seconds, then turned and walked out. Bradshaw followed him into the street. "You want to tell me what that was about?" "They were talking about Leanne. The Chinese woman you hired?" "Yeah, I heard about that." Bradshaw pulled out a tobacco pouch and started rolling a cigarette. "Look, Wade, I ain't going to tell you how to run your ranch, but you got to understand what you're stirring up here. People in this town, they don't like change, they don't like outsiders, and they especially don't like the idea of a white man and a Chinese woman under the same roof. We ain't under the same roof, she's in the bunkhouse. Don't matter, people see what they want to see." Bradshaw lit his cigarette. "Vernon Hale's been making noise, says you're setting a bad precedent. Says if one rancher starts hiring Chinese workers, pretty soon there won't be jobs for white men.
That's horseshit. There's more work than workers out here. Everyone knows that.
I know it. You know it. But Hale's got influence, and he's got people scared about their livelihoods. Bradshaw took a drag and exhaled slowly. Just watch yourself. Keep your head down. And for God's sake, don't go picking fights with Hale's men. You ain't gonna win that war. Wade mounted his horse without responding. He knew Bradshaw was right. He also knew it didn't matter. Because on the ride home, all he could think about was that laughter in the saloon, and the crude jokes, and the way they'd talked about Leanne like she was property, like she was something less than human. And he realized with uncomfortable clarity that he cared. Not in some abstract, decent human being way, but personally, specifically, in a way that made his chest tight and his thoughts complicated. That was the most dangerous thing of all. When Wade got back to the ranch, it was full dark. He unloaded the supplies and brought them into the kitchen where Leanne was finishing up the dishes from her own dinner. She'd saved him a plate, beans and cornbread, covered with a cloth to keep warm. "You didn't have to wait up," he said. "I wasn't waiting up, I was working." She dried her hands on her apron. "Did you have trouble in town?" "What makes you think that?" "You're holding that flour sack like you want to strangle it." Wade looked down. She was right. His knuckles were white. He forced himself to relax and set the supplies on the table. "Town talk," he said. "Nothing worth repeating." Leanne nodded slowly. She'd been through this before, he realized, probably more times than he could count. She knew exactly what town talk meant. "If it's easier," she said carefully, "I can stay out of sight when you have visitors. Or I can leave entirely. I don't want to cause problems for you." "You ain't causing problems. People are causing problems." "Same result?" "Not the same at all." Wade met her eyes. "You do your work. You keep to yourself. You ain't done nothing wrong. Anyone who says different can answer to me." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. Like she wasn't used to someone defending her. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just doing what's right." But as he ate his dinner alone on the porch again, Wade wondered if that was really true. Because there was a difference between doing what was right and doing what felt necessary. And somewhere in the last 8 days, Leanne had crossed from the first category into the second. He didn't know when it had happened. Maybe when he'd come home to a clean house and realized he hadn't thought about Sarah's ghost all day. Maybe when he'd caught Leanne singing while mending fences and felt something in his chest that wasn't grief. Maybe it was earlier in that first moment when she'd looked at him with those careful, guarded eyes and he'd recognized his own loneliness reflected back. Didn't matter when. What mattered was that it had happened, and there was no undoing it. 2 weeks became 3. The ranch showed signs of actual recovery. Fences got mended properly. The barn roof got patched. The house stayed clean. Meals appeared regularly. And for the first time in years, Wade went to bed without feeling like the whole world was made of ashes. But the town's hostility grew sharper. Patterson started charging Wade extra for supplies, claiming inflation. Ranch hands crossed the street to avoid him. The preacher gave a sermon about the corruption of Christian values by foreign influence, never mentioning Wade by name, but making it obvious enough that half the congregation stared at him during the hymns. Wade ignored all of it. He had practice ignoring things. What he couldn't ignore was the way Leanne changed. She started working even harder, as if proving her worth could shield her from the town's hatred. She stopped singing. She flinched when horses approached the property, always checking to see if it was trouble coming, and she started to pull away from him specifically. Fewer words, less eye contact. Building walls where there had been a tentative, careful trust. It bothered him more than it should have. One evening in late September, Wade found her behind the barn, staring out at the ridge where the sun was setting. She didn't hear him approach. Or maybe she did, and just didn't move. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine." "You're a terrible liar." That got a small, sad smile. "I've been told." Wade leaned against the barn wall beside her. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. "I had a husband once," Leanne said suddenly. "In California. He worked on the railroad." Wade said nothing, sensing she needed to talk, not be questioned. "There was an accident, a tunnel collapse. They didn't even bring his body back." She wrapped her arms around herself. "After that, I had nothing.
No money, no family, no protection. I tried to find work, but nobody wanted to hire a Chinese widow. They said I'd bring bad luck. That's superstitious nonsense.
I know, but it doesn't matter what's true when everyone believes the lie. She glanced at him. Elias found me in Sacramento. I was about 2 days from starving. He said he knew a place where someone needed help. I didn't ask questions. I just came. Why are you telling me this?
Because you deserve to know what you're protecting. I'm not just some stranger. I'm someone people think is cursed. Bad luck. A problem waiting to happen. She turned to face him fully. And they're not entirely wrong. Everywhere I go, trouble follows. Not because I cause it, but because people decide I do. And now it's following me here. To you. Let it come. Wade, I mean it. He straightened up, meeting her eyes. I've had 5 years of peace and quiet, and it near about killed me. If trouble wants to show up because I hired someone who actually gives a damn about keeping this place running, then trouble can get in line with all the other things I've survived. Leanne studied his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. It was a fair question. Wade didn't have a good answer. Maybe I'm tired of not caring, he said finally. Maybe I'm tired of being the ghost everyone thinks I am. She didn't respond right away, just looked at him with those dark, careful eyes that seemed to see through every defense he'd built. You're not a ghost, she said quietly. You're just hurt. Something in Wade's chest cracked, not broke. He'd been broken for years. This was different. This was something starting to heal in a way that hurt worse than staying broken. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Just stood there while the last light drained from the sky and the first stars appeared. Finally, Leanne spoke again. I should get back. Early day tomorrow. Yeah. She started toward the bunkhouse, then paused and looked back. Wade? Yeah? Thank you for not being afraid of me. She left before he could tell her that he was afraid. Just not of her, of what he was starting to feel, of how much it would hurt to lose this again. But he didn't say any of that. He just watched her disappear into the darkness and wondered when he'd become someone who cared again. The trouble Leanne predicted arrived 3 nights later. Wade was in the barn, checking on a mare that looked close to foaling when he heard horses outside. Multiple horses. Voices that were too loud and too aggressive to be friendly. He grabbed his rifle and stepped into the yard. 5 men sat on horseback, backlit by the moon. He recognized most of them, Cobb and 3 other Hale ranch hands, plus a man named Jessup, who ran a failing homestead north of town, all of them drunk, judging by the way they swayed in their saddles. Evening, Mercer, Cobb said. His voice was cheerful in a way that set Wade's teeth on edge. We came to have a conversation about your employment practices. Nothing to talk about. Get off my property. See, that's where you're wrong. Cobb dismounted, and the others followed. We got plenty to talk about, like how you're harboring a Chinese woman, like how that sets a bad precedent for the whole territory, like how maybe she should come with us back to town where people can keep an eye on her. Wade raised the rifle. Last chance. Leave. You gonna shoot all 5 of us? Jessup laughed. Over a damn Chinaman? She's a woman, not a man. And yeah, I'll shoot all 5 of you if that's what it takes. The laughter died. Then the door to the bunkhouse opened and Leanne stepped out. Don't, Wade said sharply, but she ignored him. She walked across the yard with her head up, stopping about 10 feet from the nearest rider. You want to talk to me? Here I am. Leave him alone. Leanne, Wade started, but Cobb cut him off. Well, look at that. She speaks. And pretty good English, too. He took a step toward her. Tell me something, sweetheart. What exactly are you doing for Mercer that's got him so protective? Must be something special, huh? Wade was moving before Cobb finished the sentence. He closed the distance in 4 strides and slammed the rifle butt into Cobb's stomach. The big man doubled over, gasping. The other ranch hands reached for their guns, but Wade already had the rifle aimed at the nearest one. Touch those weapons and I'll kill you, Wade said, his voice flat and cold. That's not a threat. That's a promise. First one of you draws, I shoot, and then we see how many of you want to die over this. Nobody moved. Wade stepped between them and Leanne, his back to her. Here's how this works. You're going to get back on those horses. You're going to ride off my property, and you're never going to come back here with this shit again. Because next time, I won't ask questions. I'll just start shooting. Hale's not going to like this. one of the ranch hands said. I don't give a damn what Hale likes. You tell him if he's got a problem, he can come talk to me himself. But he better come ready for a fight, because that's what he'll get. Cobb was still bent over, struggling to breathe. Jessup helped him back onto his horse. You're making a mistake, Mercer, Cobb wheezed. Choosing her over your own people. She is my people. Anyone under my protection is my people. You got that? They rode off without answering, disappearing into the darkness in a cloud of dust and muttered threats. Wade stood there until the hoofbeats faded completely. Then he lowered the rifle and turned around. Leanne was trembling, not crying, not panicking, just trembling like she was made of glass and someone had struck a wrong note nearby. You all right? Wade asked. She nodded, but it was a lie. Come on. He started toward the house. You're sleeping inside tonight. Bunkhouse ain't safe. Wade, I can't. Not asking. He held the door open. Someone might come back. I need to be able to hear if there's trouble. It was a practical excuse, and they both knew it. The real reason was simpler. He couldn't stand the thought of her out there alone, frightened, waiting for men who might return. Leanne followed him inside. Wade pointed to the bedroom, the one he hadn't slept in since Sarah died, preferring the small cot in the front room. Take the bed. I'll be out here. This is your room. It was my room. Now it's just a room, and you're using it. He set the rifle by the door. Get some sleep. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. She nodded and disappeared into the bedroom, closing the door quietly. Wade sat on the cot, rifle across his lap, and stared at nothing. The ranch house was quiet except for the creaking boards and the wind outside. But it felt different. Fuller. Like it was coming back to life in ways that terrified him. Because he knew what came next. He'd lived this before. You let someone in, you start to care, and then the universe takes them away and leaves you with nothing but ghosts. He'd sworn never to do this again. But as he sat there in the darkness, listening to Leanne's quiet breathing from the other room, Wade realized it was already too late. He'd already let her in. And whatever came next, town gossip, Vernon Hale's threats, or his own damaged heart, he was going to have to face it. Because for the first time in 5 years, Wade Mercer wasn't a ghost anymore. He was alive. And that was the most dangerous thing he could be. Morning came too early and too bright. Wade woke to the smell of coffee and realized he'd actually slept. 4 solid hours without jerking awake to phantom sounds or Sarah's ghost standing in the corner. The cot had left his back stiff, but that was normal. What wasn't normal was the sound of someone moving around in his kitchen who wasn't him. Leanne was already dressed, hair braided tight, working at the stove like the previous night's confrontation had never happened. But Wade noticed the way her shoulders stayed tense, the way she kept glancing toward the windows. You sleep at all? He asked. Some. She poured coffee into 2 cups without asking if he wanted any. I heard you pacing around 3. Old habit. Lying is your old habit. She set 1 cup in front of him. You were checking the perimeter. I heard the door. Wade wrapped his hands around the warm ceramic and didn't deny it. He'd checked the barn twice, walked the fence line visible from the house, and spent 20 minutes just standing in the yard listening to the night. Nobody had come back, but that didn't mean they wouldn't. We need to talk about what happens next, Leanne said. Nothing happens next. You keep working, I keep running the ranch, and those bastards stay gone. Wade. She sat down across from him, and the use of his first name made him look up. She rarely used it. You threatened Vernon Hale's men. You chose me over them. That has consequences. Let it have consequences. You say that like you don't have anything to lose. Her voice was quiet but firm. But you do. This ranch, your reputation, your safety, and you're risking all of it for someone you've known 3 weeks. 4 weeks tomorrow. That doesn't make it better. Wade drank his coffee. It was good. She'd figured out he liked it strong enough to strip paint. You think I should have let them take you? I think you should have stayed out of it. That ain't who I am. Maybe it should be. Leanne's hands were wrapped tight around her own cup. I've seen this before, Wade. Good people get destroyed defending people like me. My husband had a friend who tried to help him when the railroad bosses were cheating Chinese workers out of wages. They beat that friend so badly he lost the use of his right arm. He had a wife and 3 children, and he could never work properly again, all because he stood up for someone the world had decided didn't matter. So I should just let wrong things happen? That your solution? I'm saying you need to understand the cost before you pay it. Wade set his cup down harder than he meant to. I already paid every cost there is. 5 years ago, I lost the only person I gave a damn about. This ranch became a tomb, and I became the corpse haunting it. I stopped caring about anything because caring meant hurting, and I'd had enough hurt to last 3 lifetimes. He met her eyes. But then you showed up, and you cleaned my house, and fixed my fences, and made me remember what it feels like to have something worth protecting again. So don't sit there and tell me I don't understand the cost. I understand it fine. I just decided it's worth paying. Leanne stared at him like he'd started speaking a foreign language. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not fair, she said finally. What's not fair? Saying things like that, making me feel like... She trailed off, shaking her head. Never mind. Like what? Like I matter. The words came out barely above a whisper. Like I'm not just another problem that needs solving. Wade wanted to tell her she was crazy, that of course she mattered, that anyone with eyes could see she was worth 10 of those drunk idiots who'd shown up last night. But the words stuck in his throat because he could see the truth in her face. She genuinely didn't believe it. Someone had spent years convincing her she was worthless, and it had taken root so deep that even basic human decency felt like a miracle. You matter, he said. And I ain't saying that to be nice. I'm saying it because it's true. And if you don't believe me, then stick around and let me prove it. Leanne's eyes got shiny, but no tears fell. She just nodded once, stood up, and went back to the stove. Breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes. The conversation was over, but something had shifted between them. Wade could feel it in the air, thick and complicated and dangerous. He went outside to feed the animals and tried not to think about it. The day passed in hard work and careful silence. Wade spent most of it reinforcing the fence line that bordered the eastern property, the side closest to town where trouble would most likely come from. Leanne worked the vegetable garden Sarah had planted years ago, coaxing life back into soil that had gone nearly fallow. They moved around each other like dancers who'd practiced the same routine for years instead of weeks. Around noon, Elias showed up with his wagon and a worried expression. Heard there was trouble last night, he said, climbing down with a grunt. Word travels fast. Word about you pulling a rifle on 5 of Hale's men? That word travels like wildfire in a drought. Elias pulled off his hat and wiped his forehead. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking they were threatening Leanne on my property. What was I supposed to do? Not threaten to kill them, for starters. Elias lowered his voice. Wade, I know you think you're doing the right thing here, but Hale's got half the territory in his pocket. You can't win a fight against him. Don't plan on fighting him. Plan on him leaving us alone. And if you don't? Wade didn't have an answer for that. Elias sighed and looked toward the garden where Leanne was working. She seems like a good woman, hard worker, keeps to herself, ain't caused you no real problems. But Wade? Sometimes good people get caught up in bad situations through no fault of their own. And when that happens, the smart thing is to cut losses before they become catastrophic. You saying I should send her away? I'm saying you need to be realistic about what you're up against. Elias put his hat back on. Hale's already spreading rumors. Says you've lost your mind with grief, that you're not thinking straight, that someone needs to step in and protect you from yourself. He's laying groundwork, Wade, building a case for why the community needs to intervene. Intervene how? Could be anything. Could be the bank suddenly calling in your loans. Could be customers refusing to do business with you. Could be the territorial judge deciding you're mentally unfit to manage property. Elias met his eyes. Or it could be something worse. Something that ends with Leanne hurt and you in a grave. Wade's jaw tightened. He threatens her, You'll what? You're one man. Hale's got money, influence, and a small army of ranch hands who do anything he asks. You stand against him, you lose. It's that simple. Then I lose. For Christ's sake, Wade, I ain't sending her away. The words came out louder than Wade intended. He took a breath, steadied himself. I already lost everyone I cared about once. I ain't doing it again just because some rich bastard thinks he owns the whole damn territory. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. You're in love with her. I ain't. Don't bother lying. I can see it all over your face. Elias's expression softened. Wade, I understand. After Sarah, After all those years alone, I get why you'd feel something for the first person who made this place feel like a home again. But that doesn't change reality. And reality is that you're putting both of you in danger. She stays. Even if it gets her killed, the question hit Wade like a physical blow. Because he hadn't thought about it that way. He'd been so focused on protecting Leanne from threats he could see, drunk ranch hands, town gossip, economic pressure, that he hadn't considered the possibility that his protection itself might be the thing that destroyed her. "I'll keep her safe," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "You can't promise that. Nobody can." Elias climbed back onto his wagon. "I hope you're right, Wade. I truly do. But hope ain't much of a strategy when you're up against Vernon Hale." He left without another word, and Wade stood in the yard watching dust settle in the wagon's wake. That evening, Wade and Leanne ate dinner together for the first time. Not because either of them suggested it, but because when she set the table, she put down 2 plates instead of 1, and when Wade came in from his final check of the property, he sat down without arguing. They ate in silence for a while. Some kind of chicken stew with vegetables from the garden. It was good. Everything she made was good. "Elias thinks I should send you away," Wade said finally. Leanne's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. She set it down carefully. "What do you think?" "I think Elias worries too much." "That's not an answer." Wade pushed food around his plate. "I think keeping you here might be selfish. I think it might be dangerous. I think there's probably a dozen good reasons why you'd be better off somewhere else." But I don't want you to go." He looked up and met her eyes. "And I know that's selfish, and I know it ain't fair to you, but there it is." Leanne was quiet for so long Wade thought maybe he'd said too much. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "After my husband died, I thought I'd never feel safe again. Every day was about survival, finding food, finding shelter, finding work that wouldn't get me killed or worse. I stopped thinking about things like comfort or peace or belonging. Those felt like luxuries I'd never have again." She looked at him. "But here, on this ranch, with you, I feel safe. For the first time in 2 years, I go to sleep without being afraid of what morning will bring. And that's worth more than you know." "Even with Hale's men threatening you?" "Even then. Because I'd rather face danger in a place that feels like home than be safe in a place where I'm completely alone." Wade's throat felt tight. "This place ain't much of a home. It's more than I've had in a long time." She picked up her spoon again. "Besides, I'm not done fixing it yet. The barn still needs work, and the north fence is a disaster, and I haven't even started on the upstairs windows." It was said lightly, like a joke, but Wade heard the real message underneath. "I'm staying. Unless you make me leave, I'm staying." "Upstairs windows are a lost cause," he said. "Half of them don't even open anymore." "Then we'll fix them." "We? You think I'm going to let you do all the work around here?" She almost smiled. "You're terrible at organizing tools. I found 3 hammers in 4 different locations yesterday. I know where everything is. That's what disorganized people always say." It was the closest thing to banter they'd ever had, and it felt strange and good and terrifying all at once, like they were building something fragile that could shatter at any moment. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence. Wade washed dishes while Leanne swept the floor, and when she went to leave for the bunkhouse, Wade found himself speaking before he'd consciously decided to. "Stay in the house again tonight." She turned. "Wade, just until things settle down. I'll sleep better knowing you're not out there alone." "Will you actually sleep, or will you pace around checking windows all night?" "Maybe both." This time she did smile, just a little. "Okay, thank you." She disappeared into the bedroom, and Wade settled onto his cot with the rifle beside him. He didn't expect to sleep, but exhaustion dragged him under faster than he anticipated. He dreamed about Sarah for the first time in months. But it wasn't a nightmare. She was standing in the garden, wearing her favorite blue dress, and she was smiling. "You can't hold on to ghosts forever," Dream Sarah said. "Eventually you have to let us go." "I don't know how," Wade heard himself say. "Yes, you do. You're already doing it." He woke before dawn to find gray light seeping through the windows and the smell of coffee already brewing. Leanne was up, moving quietly so as not to wake him, but Wade's body had decades of habit built in. He sat up, rubbed his face, and tried to remember the last time he'd slept past 5. Morning, Leanne said, not turning from the stove. Morning. I was thinking we should ride out to the south pasture today. Check on the cattle. I haven't seen them up close yet. Wade blinked. It was a reasonable suggestion, but something about the way she said it made him pause. You know how to ride? I grew up on a farm, remember? I can ride. When's the last time you were on a horse? 3 years ago, maybe 4. She poured coffee and brought it to him. I'm sure it's like everything else. You don't really forget. Wade accepted the cup and studied her face. She looked determined, which usually meant she was nervous. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to learn this ranch properly. You can't do that from the yard. She had a point. And truthfully, Wade could use the help. The cattle had been mostly neglected for years, and he needed to take proper inventory before winter hit. All right, Lisa, he said. We'll go after breakfast. But if you fall off and break something, don't say I didn't warn you. I won't fall off. She fell off. Not immediately, and not dramatically, but about 2 hours into the ride, her mare spooked at a rattlesnake and Leanne went tumbling into a patch of sagebrush. Wade was off his horse before she hit the ground. You hurt? He crouched beside her, checking for obvious injuries. Just my pride. She sat up slowly, picking twigs out of her hair. And maybe my tailbone. Told you. Don't start. But she was almost laughing, which Wade hadn't expected. Most people would be embarrassed or angry. Leanne just looked annoyed at the horse, who was standing a few feet away looking innocent. Wade helped her up, his hand lingering on her arm a moment longer than necessary. She was close enough that he could see the small scar above her left eyebrow, close enough to notice that her eyes weren't pure black, but actually very dark brown. You're staring, Leanne said quietly. Wade stepped back like he'd been burned. Sorry. Making sure you didn't hit your head. My head is fine. Right. Good. He turned to catch her horse, suddenly very interested in checking the animal's hooves. We should probably head back. You're going to be sore tomorrow. I'm sore now. Might as well finish what we started. They spent the rest of the afternoon counting cattle and checking the herd's condition. Wade had expected to find disaster, half the animals dead or missing, the rest sick or starving. But Leanne had been quietly supplementing their feed for weeks, and it showed. The cattle were thin but healthy, and a quick count revealed he'd only lost about a dozen head over the summer. Could be worse, Wade said. Could be better. Leanne was taking notes in a small book she'd brought. You need at least 20 more head to make winter profitable, and the breeding stock needs attention. You know about cattle breeding? I know about animal husbandry, cattle, pigs, chickens. The principles are similar. She closed her notebook. My father raised livestock in Guangdong before we came to America. I learned from him. It was the most she'd ever said about her past, and Wade wanted to ask more. But before he could, she turned her horse toward home. We should get back before dark, she said. They rode in silence as the sun dropped toward the horizon. Wade found himself watching her instead of the trail, noticing things he shouldn't notice. The way she sat a horse with her back straight despite the pain she had to be in. The way strands of hair had escaped her braid and caught the evening light. The way she looked like she belonged here, on this land, in a way that made his chest ache. When they reached the ranch, Leanne dismounted stiffly and immediately went to unsaddle her horse. Wade stopped her. I'll handle the horses. You go inside and rest. I know you can. I'm saying you don't have to. He took the reins from her hands, his fingers brushing hers. Go, before you can't walk at all tomorrow. She looked like she wanted to argue, but pain won out. Thank you. Wade took care of both horses, then checked the perimeter one more time before heading inside. He found Leanne sitting at the table, her notebook open, writing by lamplight. What's that? He asked. Inventory. Things we need for winter. Things we should do before the snow comes. She didn't look up. You're short on almost everything. Feed, supplies, firewood. If we don't start preparing now, it's going to be a hard few months. I know. So what's your plan? Wade didn't have a plan. For 5 years, his plan had been to survive until he didn't. Winter came, winter went, and he'd somehow stayed alive without really trying. But Leanne was looking at him expecting an actual answer, so he improvised. I'll ride to Cheyenne next week. Buy what we need there instead of dealing with Patterson's price gouging. That's 3 days' travel each way. You got a better idea? Yes. We both go, split the work, cut the time in half. She met his eyes. Unless you don't think I can handle it. That ain't the issue. Then what is? Wade couldn't tell her the truth, that the thought of being alone with her for 6 days, camping under the stars, with no buffer of ranch work to keep things professional, scared him more than any threat Vernon Hale could make. So he said something else that was also true. Town's already talking about you being here. If we travel together, stay in hotels together, people will assume things. Let them assume. Leanne's voice was matter of fact. They already think the worst. At least this way we get work done. Leanne. I'm going, Wade. You can either take me with you properly, or I'll follow you on my own. Your choice. He believed her. That was the problem. She had that look in her eyes, the one that said she'd made up her mind and arguing was pointless. Fine, Wade said. We leave Monday, but we're bringing weapons and staying alert. Hale's men could try something on the road. I know. And we split hotel costs. I ain't having you. We'll figure out the details later. She closed her notebook. Right now, I need to sleep before my entire body stops working. She stood up with visible effort, and Wade watched her limp toward the bedroom. Tomorrow she'd be worse. That kind of fall always hurt more the second day. But she hadn't complained once, hadn't asked for sympathy, hadn't done anything except keep working. It reminded him of Sarah. Not because they were similar, they weren't, but because that's what love looked like. Someone who showed up, did the work, and didn't expect applause for it. And that's when Wade had to admit the truth he'd been avoiding for weeks. Elias was right. He was falling in love with her. Maybe had already fallen, and that was going to complicate everything in ways he couldn't begin to predict. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. They sorted supplies, made lists, and checked equipment. Leanne moved like every muscle hurt, but she refused to slow down. Wade tried to get her to rest and got ignored for his trouble. By Sunday night, they were as ready as they could be. Wade lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to Leanne's quiet breathing from the next room, and wondered what the hell he was doing. Getting back on a horse. That's what he was doing. After 5 years of barely existing, he was choosing to live again. And whether that ended in triumph or disaster didn't really matter, because at least he'd be alive for it. Monday morning came cold and clear. They left before sunrise, riding east toward Cheyenne with saddlebags full of money and hope. The first day passed without incident. They made camp that night near a creek, and Leanne proved she knew how to cook over an open fire just as well as she did on a stove. Where'd you learn that? Wade asked, watching her turn rabbit on a spit. Necessity. After my husband died, I spent a month on the road looking for work. You learn fast when the alternative is starving. Must have been hard. Everything was hard. She rotated the spit. But I survived. That's more than some people managed. They ate in comfortable silence, and when it was time to sleep, Wade gave Leanne his bedroll and took the saddle blanket for himself. That's not fair, she protested. You're still sore from yesterday. Take it. Wade, take it, Leanne, please. She did, but she looked unhappy about it. Wade settled near the fire and tried not to think about how domestic this felt. How right. Just two people surviving together under an indifferent sky. He must have dozed off because he woke to Leanne shaking his shoulder, her hand over his mouth. Someone's coming, she whispered. Wade was instantly alert, hand going to his rifle. He heard it now, horses, multiple riders, moving slowly, trying to be quiet. He gestured for Leanne to get behind the rocks near the creek. She moved silently, taking her rifle with her. Wade stayed by the fire, waiting. 3 riders emerged from the darkness. Wade recognized one of them immediately. Vernon Hale himself, flanked by 2 ranch hands. Mercer, Hale said, staying mounted. He was a big man, 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Funny running into you out here. Ain't funny at all, since you were obviously following us. Wade kept his rifle across his lap, casual but ready. What do you want? Just wanted to have a conversation, man to man. Hale's eyes scanned the camp and found the 2 bedrolls. Where's your Chinese woman? None of your business. See, that's where you're wrong. It is my business, because you're making all the white ranchers in the territory look bad. Hale dismounted slowly, hands visible. People are starting to ask questions. If Mercer can hire Chinese workers, why can't we? And if we do, what happens to good white men who need those jobs? There's more work than workers, you know that. I know that you're setting a precedent that's going to cause problems.
Hale took a step closer. I'm a reasonable man, Mercer. I'm willing to help you out of this situation. I'll pay you $200 to send her away. Hell, I'll even find her a position somewhere else. San Francisco, maybe. Somewhere she can be with her own kind. She stays. You're not thinking clearly. Grief does that to a man. I understand. I lost my first wife 30 years ago. It nearly destroyed me. But you can't let loneliness drive you to make stupid decisions. Wade stood up. You done? I'm trying to help you. No, you're trying to control me, same way you control everyone else in this territory. But I ain't for sale, Hale, and neither is she. $300, final offer. Get off my campsite. Hale's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. That's my right. Not when it affects the whole community. Hale climbed back on his horse. I tried to do this the easy way. Remember that. The three riders disappeared into the darkness, and Wade stood frozen, listening to the hoofbeats fade. Leanne emerged from the rocks. What did he mean, the easy way? Means things are about to get harder. They didn't sleep the rest of the night, just sat by the fire, weapons ready, waiting for dawn. When morning finally came, they broke camp in silence and continued toward Cheyenne. But something had changed. The trip wasn't about supplies anymore. It was about survival. And Wade was starting to realize that maybe Elias had been right all along. Maybe he'd already lost this fight before it even started. But as he rode beside Leanne, watching her scan the horizon with the same wariness he felt, Wade knew one thing for certain. He'd rather lose fighting than win by surrender, even if it cost him everything. They reached Cheyenne by midday Tuesday, both of them exhausted and jumpy from a night spent expecting ambush at every shadow. The city sprawled across the plains like something dropped from another world, wooden buildings packed tight, muddy streets churning with wagons and horses, the constant noise of commerce and survival. Wade had always hated it. Too many people, too much chaos, too much reminder that the world kept spinning whether you wanted it to or not. Lynn stared at everything with wide eyes, and Wade realized she probably hadn't seen a real city since leaving California. Stay close, he said, guiding his horse toward a livery stable. This place eats people who don't pay attention. I can handle myself. I know. But handle yourself next to me anyway. They stabled the horses, and Wade secured them a room at a boarding house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just clean beds and a lock on the door. The landlady, a thin woman with suspicious eyes, looked at Leanne and then at Wade. We don't usually take mixed company, she said carefully. Wade dropped coins on the counter, twice what the room cost. You do now. The woman took the money and handed him a key without another word. Wade led Leanne upstairs to a small room with 2 narrow beds and a window overlooking the street. You take the one by the wall, he said. Safer. Leanne set down her bag and turned to him. Wade, about what that woman said. Don't. She don't matter. None of them matter. He checked the window lock. We'll buy what we need tomorrow, spend one more night, and head back. The less time we spend here, the better. Agreed. They went downstairs and found a restaurant that served passable food. Wade noticed the stares, some curious, some hostile, all invasive. Leanne kept her eyes on her plate and ate quickly, but her shoulders had that same tension he'd seen at the ranch. You get used to it, she said quietly. The staring. You shouldn't have to, but I do. That's reality. She pushed vegetables around with her fork. My husband used to say that anger at injustice is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only destroys you. Your husband sounds like he was smarter than me. He was. But he's also dead, so maybe being smart isn't enough. The bitterness in her voice surprised Wade. She rarely talked about her husband, and when she did, it was always respectful, careful. This was different, raw. You angry at him? Wade asked. Sometimes. Is that terrible? No, it's human. Leanne finally looked up. He got himself killed trying to fight a system that didn't care if he lived or died. He left me alone in a country that hates people like me, with no money and no protection. And the worst part is that he thought he was doing the right thing. He thought standing up mattered. Her hands tightened on her fork. But it didn't. He died and nothing changed. The railroad kept cheating workers. The bosses kept getting rich. And I kept starving. So you think he should have just accepted it? Kept his head down? I think he should have thought about me before he made himself a martyr. She set down her fork. I'm sorry. That's unfair. He was a good man. Good men can still make bad choices. Is that what you think you're doing? Making a bad choice by protecting me? Wade considered the question seriously. I think I'm making the only choice I can live with. Whether it's bad or good, guess we'll find out.
They finished eating in silence and walked back to the boarding house as the sun set. Wade stayed alert, watching for anyone following them, but the streets were just crowded with regular people living regular lives. Nobody cared about a broken-down rancher and a Chinese woman except to stare for a few seconds before moving on. Back in the room, they settled into an awkward routine. Leanne changed behind a privacy screen while Wade checked and rechecked his rifle. Then she sat on her bed and Wade sat on his, and they both pretended this was normal. Tell me about your wife, Leanne said suddenly. Wade's hand stilled on the rifle. Why? Because you never talk about her. And I think maybe you should. Talking don't bring people back. No. But it helps you remember they were real. Leanne pulled her knees up to her chest. My husband's name was Chen Wei. He loved terrible jokes, and he sang off key, and he couldn't cook to save his life. If I don't talk about those things, eventually I'll forget them, and then it'll be like he never existed at all. Wade set the rifle aside. Talking about Sarah felt like opening a wound that had barely scabbed over, but Leanne had shared her pain. Seemed only fair he share his. Her name was Sarah. Sarah Mackenzie, before she married me. She was... He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like every other grief-struck widower. She was practical, didn't suffer fools, could outshoot most men and wasn't shy about proving it. She saw this ranch when it was nothing but land and a dream, and she made it real through sheer stubbornness. You loved her, more than I knew how to say. That was the problem. I thought we had time, thought I could show her instead of telling her, and then one winter she got sick and I lost my chance. Wade stared at his hands. I never told her she saved my life. Before I met her, I was just drifting, angry at the world, angry at myself, didn't know what I wanted except that it wasn't what I had. She gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something instead of just destroying it. She sounds remarkable. She was. And when she died, I thought that was it. Thought the best part of my life was over and all that was left was waiting around to join her. He looked at Leanne. But then you showed up, and you made me realize that maybe Sarah didn't give me purpose. She taught me how to find it, and maybe I could do that again if I stopped being so damn scared. Leanne's eyes were bright in the lamplight. I scare you? Terrify me. Because caring about someone means risking loss, and I've lost enough for 10 lifetimes. So have I, but I'm still here. She smiled slightly. We're both still here. That has to count for something. Yeah, it does. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Wade felt something shift between them again. Not breaking, not even cracking, just settling into a new shape. We should sleep, Leanne said finally. Tomorrow's going to be long. Wade nodded and turned down the lamp. He lay in the darkness, listening to Leanne's breathing even out. And for the first time since Sarah died, he didn't feel like he was drowning. He felt like he might actually make it to shore. Morning came with gray light and the sounds of the city waking up. They ate a quick breakfast and spent the day moving through Cheyenne's shops and warehouses, buying everything the ranch needed for winter. Feed, flour, salt, tools, ammunition, blankets, medicine. Wade's money dwindled steadily, but Leanne kept him from wasting it on things that looked good but weren't necessary. You don't need 3 different kinds of nails, she said, putting 2 boxes back. They're different sizes. And you'll only use one size, trust me. By late afternoon, they had everything loaded onto a rented wagon that they'd returned to the livery station outside town. Wade was exhausted, his head pounding from noise and crowds. But Leanne looked energized, alive in a way he hadn't seen before. You like this, he observed. The negotiating, the planning. I'm good at it. My father taught me to see value where others don't. She checked their list one more time. We saved almost $40 by buying smart. You saved $40. I would have just paid asking price. I know, men usually do. Wade almost smiled. That right? That's right. You see a problem, you throw money at it. Women see a problem, we find the cheapest solution that actually works. She folded the list and tucked it away. It's why we survive. They were walking back toward the boarding house when Wade spotted trouble. 3 men standing outside a saloon, watching them. One of them was Cobb. Keep walking, Wade said quietly. Don't look at them. But Cobb stepped into their path, grinning. Well, well, the ghost rancher and his little pet. You two having a nice trip? Wade's hand moved toward his gun, but Leanne touched his arm. We're just passing through, she said calmly. No trouble. Trouble's what happens when people forget their place. Cobb looked her up and down in a way that made Wade's vision narrow. You know what they do to women like you in San Francisco? They put you in houses where men can... Wade hit him. One clean punch to the jaw that sent Cobb sprawling. The other 2 men reached for their weapons, but Wade already had his pistol out. Next man who moves gets shot, Wade said. People were stopping to watch now. A crowd forming. Wade knew this was stupid, knew he was making everything worse, but he was so tired of hearing Leanne talked about like she was something less than human. Cobb climbed to his feet, blood running from his split lip. You're going to regret that. Add it to the list. A whistle cut through the tension, sheriff's deputies pushing through the crowd, hands on their gun belts. A tall man with a badge stepped forward. Sheriff Davis, Wade remembered. They'd met once, years ago. What's going on here? Davis asked. These men were harassing us, Leanne said before anyone else could speak. We tried to walk away, but they blocked our path. That true, Cobb? She's lying. They started... I saw the whole thing, Sheriff. A woman stepped out of the crowd, well-dressed, maybe 50. These men were making crude comments. When the lady tried to leave, they blocked her. The gentleman defended her. Davis looked at Wade, then at Cobb, clearly calculating. You boys work for Vernon Hale? What's that got to do with anything? Means I know you're troublemakers. Davis gestured. Get out of here. And if I see you starting fights again, you'll spend a week in jail. Cobb and his men left, shooting Wade looks that promised future violence. The crowd dispersed. The well-dressed woman nodded at Leanne and disappeared before Wade could thank her. You're Mercer, right? Davis said. From Red Hollow Ridge? That's right. Heard you've been having some problems with Hale's people. Nothing I can't handle. Maybe, but starting fights in my town ain't the way to handle it. Davis looked at Leanne. Ma'am, you got somewhere safe to stay tonight? We have a room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, Leanne said. Good. Stay there. And you two? He looked at both of them. Leave first thing in the morning. I don't want this escalating. They walked back to the boarding house in silence. Once inside their room, with the door locked, Wade finally let himself breathe. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have hit him. Yes, you should have. He deserved it. Leanne sat on her bed. But that woman who spoke up for us, why did she do that? Some people are decent, I guess. In my experience, decent people stay quiet. It's safer. She looked troubled, which means she had a reason. I just don't know what it was. Wade didn't have an answer for that. He cleaned his scraped knuckles and tried not to think about how much worse things were going to get. They left Cheyenne before sunrise Wednesday, pushing hard to put distance between themselves and potential trouble. The loaded wagon made travel slower, but they made decent progress. By nightfall, they were halfway home. This time, Wade insisted they take turns keeping watch. He took first shift, sitting by the fire while Leanne slept. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, dark and empty and full of sounds that might be wind or might be riders. Around midnight, Leanne woke and came to sit beside him. Your shift isn't for 2 more hours, Wade said. Couldn't sleep. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. I keep thinking about what happens when we get back. We unload supplies, prepare for winter, and keep working. You make it sound simple. It is simple. We just keep going. Until Hale forces us to stop? Leanne pulled the blanket tighter. Wade, I need you to promise me something. What? If it comes down to choosing between the ranch and me, choose the ranch. Wade turned to look at her. That's not a choice I'm going to make. It might be. Hale has money, power, influence. He can destroy you financially, socially, maybe even legally. But only if I'm there. If I leave, you're not leaving. Wade, listen to me. No, you listen. He set down his coffee cup. I spent 5 years choosing nothing, choosing to let the ranch rot, choosing to let myself rot right along with it. And you know what that got me? A slow death. So I'm done choosing the safe option. I'm choosing what feels right, what feels worth fighting for. And that's you. That's us. Whatever we are or might become. Leanne stared at him, and in the firelight he could see tears tracking down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away.
I'm falling in love with you, she whispered, and it's the stupidest thing I've ever done. Wade's heart stopped, restarted, hammered against his ribs.
Why is it stupid? Because we have no future. Because the world won't let us. Because even if we survive Hale, even if we keep the ranch, we'll spend the rest of our lives fighting people who think we're wrong, just for existing together. She wiped her eyes roughly. But I can't help it. You're the first person in years who's made me feel like I matter, like I'm more than just someone to be tolerated or used or thrown away. Wade reached out slowly and took her hand. She didn't pull away. I don't have pretty words, he said. I don't know how to make this sound romantic or right, but I know that when you're around, the world feels less heavy. I know that I'd rather fight beside you than find peace without you. And I know that what I feel, he paused, making himself say it, what I feel is love. Maybe has been for weeks. I was just too scared to admit it. Leanne's fingers tightened around his. This is going to end badly. Maybe. Or maybe we're both too used to bad endings. Wade pulled her closer, slowly, giving her time to resist. She didn't. Maybe we get to write a different story. I don't know how. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. She kissed him then, soft and uncertain, like someone testing whether the ground would hold her weight. Wade kissed her back, gentle, careful, terrified of breaking something precious. It wasn't like kissing Sarah had been. That had been familiar, comfortable, the kiss of two people who'd built a life together. This was different. This was two damaged people trying to build something from broken pieces. When they pulled apart, Leanne rested her forehead against his. We're insane. Completely. Hale's gonna come after us harder now. Let him. The town's gonna make our lives hell. They already do. We might lose everything. I already lost everything once. Surviving it made me stronger. Wade cupped her face in his hands. Besides, you're worth whatever comes next. Leanne laughed, but it came out half sob. You don't know that. Yes, I do. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, in the thin blanket, watching the fire burn down to embers. Wade knew they should sleep, knew they had hard days ahead, but this moment felt too fragile to abandon. Tell me something about you I don't know, Leanne said. Like what? Anything. Something real. Wade thought about it. I wanted to be a carpenter when I was young. Build houses, furniture, things that lasted. My father said it was foolish. Real men worked the land, not wood, so I became a rancher instead. And I was good at it, good enough that I didn't regret the choice, but sometimes I still wonder what I would have built if I'd followed what I wanted instead of what was expected. It's not too late, you could still learn. I'm 42 years old. So? My grandmother learned to read when she was 60. Age is just an excuse for people who've given up. Leanne shifted to look at him. If we survive this, if we keep the ranch and make it through winter, I want you to build something, a table, a chair, whatever you want, just to prove you can. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Promise me anyway. Wade smiled despite himself. Fine. I promise. Good. She settled against him again. Now tell me something else. They talked until dawn, trading stories and secrets like currency. Wade learned that Leanne hated the taste of whiskey, but loved tea. That she'd had a younger brother who died of fever when he was 6. That she could speak 3 languages, but only read in 2. That she'd once punched a railroad foreman who tried to cheat her husband, and the only reason she didn't get arrested was because the foreman was too embarrassed to admit a woman half his size had knocked him down. Leanne learned that Wade had nearly died from scarlet fever when he was 8, that he could play harmonica but refused to because it reminded him of his father, that he'd proposed to Sarah after knowing her for 3 weeks, and everyone said it wouldn't last, but they'd had 12 years together before she died, that he still had nightmares about the day he came home with medicine to find her already cold. By the time the sun rose, they knew each other in ways that felt dangerous and necessary. We should get moving, Wade said reluctantly. I know. Neither of them moved for another 5 minutes. The ride home took another day and a half. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt different now. Comfortable. Connected. Wade kept catching himself looking at Leanne, memorizing the way sunlight caught in her hair, the way she sat her horse with growing confidence. They reached Red Hollow Ridge just before sunset Thursday. The ranch looked exactly as they'd left it, weathered, stubborn, still standing. Wade had never been so glad to see the place. They unloaded the wagon together, and Wade noticed Elias's horse tied near the barn. The old man emerged as they were carrying the last of the supplies inside. "You made it back," Elias said. He looked relieved and worried in equal measure. "Heard there was trouble in Cheyenne." "Word really does travel," Wade muttered. "Hale's making noise about you attacking his men unprovoked. Says you're unstable." Elias glanced at Leanne. "Says the Chinese woman has you under some kind of spell." "That's horse shit." "I know it's horse shit, but half the town believes it." Elias lowered his voice. "Wade, things are getting bad. The bank's asking questions about your loans. Patterson's refusing to extend you any more credit, and Hale's been buying up properties around yours, consolidating land. He's boxing you in." Wade felt Leanne stiffen beside him. He reached out and took her hand right there in front of Elias, making a choice. "Let him box me in. I ain't going anywhere." Elias's eyes dropped to their joined hands. His expression shifted through several emotions Wade couldn't quite read. "You're in love with her," Elias said finally. "Yeah. And you?" He looked at Leanne. "You feel the same?" "Yes," Leanne said quietly. Elias was quiet for a long moment, then he sighed. "Well, hell, I guess we're doing this." "We?" Wade asked. "You think I'm going to let you face down Vernon Hale alone? Sarah was my niece. She'd haunt me forever if I didn't help." Elias shook his head. "You're both idiots, but you're my idiots. So what's the plan?" Wade looked at Leanne. She looked back at him. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something like hope. "We survive winter," Wade said. "We keep the ranch running, and we don't back down." "That's not much of a plan." "It's what we've got." Elias snorted. "Then I guess it'll have to do." That night, after Elias left and the animals were fed, and the supplies were stored, Wade and Leanne stood on the porch watching stars emerge. The temperature had dropped, carrying the first real hint of coming winter. "Storm's coming," Leanne said, looking at the horizon where clouds were building. "Yeah, big one by the look of it. We should prepare. Bring the horses in, secure the shutters." Wade pulled her close and kissed her, cutting off the practical planning. When they broke apart, she looked dazed. "What was that for?" she asked. "Because I can. Because you're here. Because we're alive and together, and I don't want to waste time on should-haves and might-be's." Leanne smiled, and it transformed her whole face. "You know, for someone who claims he's not good with words, you're doing fine. Don't get used to it." The storm hit around midnight, not the gentle rain that made ranchers grateful, but the violent kind that tore at fences and flooded dry creek beds. Wade woke to thunder that shook the house and rain hammering the roof like bullets. He found Leanne already up, staring out the window at the chaos. "The horses," she said. "The barn door. I don't think I latched it properly." Wade was pulling on his boots before she finished the sentence. "I'll check it. I'm coming with you." "Leanne, don't argue. We're wasting time." They ran out into the storm together, immediately soaked to the skin. The wind was strong enough to lean against, and the rain came sideways, stinging like thrown gravel. Wade could barely see 10 feet ahead. The barn door was indeed open, banging against the frame. Inside, the horses were panicking, their eyes rolling white in the lightning flashes. Wade and Leanne worked together to calm them, speaking soft words that got swallowed by thunder. They'd just gotten the last horse settled when Leanne grabbed his arm. "Listen. Do you hear that?" Wade listened. Over the storm he heard it, a horse screaming, not in fear, in pain. "That's coming from the ravine," Leanne said. "Wade, one of them must have gotten out before we—" She was running before he could stop her, out into the storm, toward the sound. Wade cursed and followed, his heart in his throat. The ravine at the edge of the property was normally dry, but tonight it was a rushing river. And caught in the brush at the edge, one of the young mares was thrashing, tangled in wire fence that had torn loose in the flood. "We have to get her out," Leanne shouted over the storm. "It's too dangerous. The bank could give way."
But Leanne was already climbing down, using rocks and roots for handholds. The water was up to her knees, the current trying to sweep her away.
Wade's vision went white with fear. He scrambled down after her, grabbing her arm just as her foot slipped. "Careful," he said, though it was pointless. Nothing about this was careful. Together they reached the mare. The animal was wild with panic, and when Wade tried to get close, she kicked out. Her hoof caught him in the shoulder, pain exploding through his arm. "Wade!" Leanne was at his side immediately. "I'm fine. Get the wire off her legs."
They worked frantically, fighting the wire and the current and the horse's terror. Leanne's hands were bleeding from the sharp metal. Wade's shoulder felt like it was on fire, but they got the mare free. "Now what?" Leanne asked. "We can't get her up the bank. She's too panicked." The ground shifted under their feet. Wade looked up and saw the ravine bank starting to crumble, tons of mud and rock about to come down on top of them. He grabbed Leanne and pushed her toward higher ground. She stumbled, fell, caught herself on a boulder just as the mudslide hit. Wade felt the ground disappear. He scrabbled for purchase, found nothing, and then he was sliding toward the rushing water. A hand caught his wrist. Leanne braced against the boulder, holding him with strength he didn't know she had. "I've got you," she gasped. "Don't let go." Wade's boots found a rock ledge. He pushed up, Leanne pulled, and somehow he made it to solid ground. They collapsed together, gasping, covered in mud. The mare had made it out on her own, scrambling up the far side of the ravine. She'd be fine. "You're insane," Wade said when he could breathe. "That could have killed you. It almost killed you." Leanne was shaking, from cold or fear or both. "If I'd lost you," he kissed her, tasting rain and mud and terror. She kissed back desperately, her hands fisting in his soaked shirt. When they pulled apart, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "We can't keep almost dying. Then we'll have to start actually living." They helped each other back to the house, moving slowly, supporting each other when the wind tried to knock them down. By the time they made it inside, they were shaking so hard they could barely close the door. Wade started a fire while Leanne found dry clothes. They changed without bothering with privacy. They'd already seen each other at their absolute worst tonight. What did modesty matter? Wrapped in blankets by the fire, drinking whiskey that burned all the way down, they finally stopped shaking. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever done," Leanne said. "Which part?" "All of it. Running out in a storm, climbing down a flooded ravine, nearly getting us both killed over a horse." "But you did it anyway." "Because I couldn't just let her suffer." Leanne looked at him. "Is that what you felt? When you defended me? When you stood up to Hale? The stupid, reckless need to do something even when it's dangerous?" "Yeah, that's exactly what I felt." She laughed, but it was shaky. "We're going to get each other killed, aren't we?" "Probably. But at least we'll go down fighting." Lynn shifted closer, and Wade wrapped his arms around her. They sat like that while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their lives. "I don't know what happens next," Leanne whispered. "I don't know how we survive what's coming." "Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. Together." "Together," she repeated, like she was testing how the word felt. Outside, the storm began to ease. By dawn, it would pass, leaving behind damage they'd have to repair and challenges they'd have to face. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And sometimes Wade thought that was enough. The storm's damage revealed itself slowly in the gray morning light. 3 sections of fence down, part of the barn roof torn loose and flapping in the residual wind, the vegetable garden mostly destroyed, plants ripped from the earth and scattered across mud that would take days to dry. And everywhere, debris, branches, tumbleweeds, pieces of things Wade couldn't even identify. He stood in the yard, surveying it all, while his shoulder throbbed where the mare had kicked him. Leanne emerged from the house carrying coffee, her hands bandaged from the wire cuts. "It's bad," she said. "Could be worse. We're alive. Animals are safe. The fence alone will take a week to repair properly, and that's if we work from dawn to dark." She handed him a cup. "And we still have regular ranch work to do." Wade sipped the coffee and tried to do math in his head. The numbers didn't work. 2 people couldn't maintain a ranch this size even under good conditions, and conditions were far from good. But admitting that felt like admitting defeat. "We'll manage," he said. "Wade?"
A horse and rider appeared on the eastern road. Wade's hand went to his gun before he recognized Elias's weathered frame. The old man looked grim as he dismounted. "You two all right? Saw the damage from the road." "We're fine. Ranch took a beating, though." Elias walked the perimeter with them, his experienced eye cataloging every problem. When he finished, he shook his head. "This is going to cost you. Money and time you don't have." "I know. And that ain't even the worst news I'm bringing." Elias pulled a folded paper from his coat. "This was posted in town this morning." Wade unfolded it. An official notice from the Territorial Land Office, dense with legal language he could barely parse. But certain phrases jumped out. Unpaid taxes. Failure to maintain property standards. Petition for reassessment of ownership. "What the hell is this?" Vernon Hale filed a complaint. "Says you've let the ranch fall into such disrepair that it's affecting property values in the whole region. Says you're not mentally competent to maintain it." Elias's voice was tight with anger. "He's trying to get the territory to seize your land and auction it off. And guess who'll be the only bidder with enough money to buy it?" Wade felt like he'd been punched. "He can't do that. This is my land. I bought it legal. I've paid taxes." "You're 3 months behind on taxes, Wade, and the property maintenance clause is real. Territories use it to prevent homesteads from becoming eyesores." Elias gestured at the storm damage. "And now this. If an inspector comes out and sees this place looking like it does, they'll use it as evidence you can't manage." Leanne was reading over Wade's shoulder, her face pale. "How long do we have?" "Hearings in 2 weeks. You'll need to show up and prove you're maintaining the property to legal standards. Bring documentation, witnesses, whatever you got." Elias met Wade's eyes. "And Wade, they're going to ask about her, about why you've got a Chinese woman living here. Hale's lawyers will make it sound improper, use it to paint you as unstable. So what am I supposed to do? Send her away to satisfy a bunch of bureaucrats? I'm saying you need to be prepared for what they'll ask." Elias looked at Leanne. "No offense, miss, but your presence here complicates things." "None taken. It's true." Leanne's voice was steady, but Wade could see the tension in her shoulders. "Maybe I should go, just until after the hearing. It would be easier." "No." Wade crumpled the notice in his fist. "I ain't playing their game. This is my land, my home, my choice who lives here. If they can't accept that, then to hell with them." "Wade, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. They want me to prove I can maintain this place? Fine. We've got 2 weeks. We'll fix everything. Make it look better than it has in 5 years. Elias stared at him. "You can't rebuild a ranch in 2 weeks. Watch me." "You're being stubborn." "I'm being right, and there's a difference." Wade turned to Leanne. "You staying or going?" She looked at him for a long moment, then at the damaged ranch, then back at him. "I'm staying, but only if you admit you need more help. We can't do this alone." "Who's going to help us? The whole town thinks we're cursed." "Not the whole town," Elias said quietly. "I might know a few folks who owe me favors. People who don't give a damn what Vernon Hale thinks." Wade felt something crack in his chest. That stubborn pride that had kept him isolated for 5 years. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness. But Leanne was right. They couldn't do this alone. "All right," he said. "Call in your favors." Over the next 3 days, something unexpected happened. People showed up. Not many, and not the ones Wade would have expected, but they came. First was a Mexican family, the Rodriguezes, who ran a small farm north of town. Miguel Rodriguez had worked with Sarah years ago on some kind of community grain storage project. He arrived with his 2 teenage sons and didn't ask questions, just started repairing fence. Then came an older black couple, the Washingtons, who'd homesteaded in the territory back when that took either courage or desperation. Mrs. Washington took one look at the destroyed garden and started replanting with seeds she'd brought. A young widow named Annie Fletcher showed up with her daughter, explaining that Elias had helped her when her husband died and she needed work anyway. She wasn't strong enough for heavy labor, but she could cook for the crew, which freed up Leanne to work outside. Even Sheriff Bradshaw stopped by one evening, officially to check on storm damage, unofficially to help Wade replace the barn roof section. "Don't make a habit of this," Bradshaw said, hammering nails with economical efficiency. "I got a reputation to maintain." "Why are you helping?" "Because Hale's a bully, and I'm tired of bullies." Bradshaw lined up another nail. "Also because your wife Sarah once talked sense into my daughter. when she was about to make a damn fool decision. Figured I owed her memory something. Wade found himself working alongside people he barely knew, all of them moving with the easy rhythm of folks who understood hard work and mutual survival. Miguel taught him a better way to set fence posts. Mrs. Washington showed Leanne how to protect seedlings from early frost. Annie's daughter sang while she worked, and the sound made the ranch feel alive in ways Wade had forgotten were possible. But not everyone was supportive. On the fourth day, while Wade was in town buying more wire, he ran into Patterson outside the general store. "Heard you got yourself a little work crew out there," Patterson said. His tone made it sound like an accusation. "Just neighbors helping neighbors." "Neighbors?" "Right." Patterson spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "You know what I hear? I hear you got Mexicans and coloreds and that Chinese woman all mixing together on your property. Hear you're running some kind of," he searched for the word, "integration experiment." Wade's hands tightened on the wire spool. "I'm running a ranch. Who helps me do that ain't your concern. It's everybody's concern when you're setting bad examples. You think white men are going to find work if ranchers start hiring anyone who'll work cheap. Those people are working for free, Patterson. As a favor. Because that's what decent humans do." "Decent," Patterson laughed. "You wouldn't know decent if it bit you, shacking up with a Chinese whore, bringing all kinds of riffraff onto your property." Wade dropped the wire and had Patterson by the collar before the man could finish. "You talk about her like that again, I'll make you eat those words along with your teeth." "Let him go, Wade," Sheriff Bradshaw's voice, calm but firm. He'd appeared from somewhere, hand resting on his gun. "Patterson, get inside your store, and keep your opinions to yourself unless you want me finding code violations in that building you call a business." Patterson scurried away. Wade released the breath he'd been holding. "You gotta stop picking fights," Bradshaw said. "He called her a—" "I know what he called her, and he's an idiot, but beating him up won't change minds. It'll just give Hale's lawyers more ammunition." Bradshaw helped Wade gather the dropped wire. "You want to win this? You do it the smart way. You show up at that hearing with your property looking perfect and witnesses who'll vouch for you. You make them see that you're a functioning member of this community, not some crazy hermit." "I am a crazy hermit." "Then fake being normal for 2 weeks. Can you do that?" Wade thought about Leanne, about the ranch, about everything riding on this hearing. "Yeah, I can do that." By the end of the first week, the progress was visible. Fences repaired and reinforced, barn roof patched properly, the yard cleared of debris. Even the house got attention. Annie and her daughter scrubbed it top to bottom while Leon worked on organizing the chaotic tool shed. The garden was still mostly bare, but Mrs. Washington promised that with the seedlings she'd planted and some makeshift protection, they'd have something growing by the hearing date. Wade worked harder than he had in years, pushing through exhaustion and pain from his still healing shoulder. Every night he collapsed into bed, barely able to move. But every morning he woke to the sound of Leon making coffee, and that was enough to get him up again. They fell into a pattern. Work from dawn until muscles screamed, quick meals that Annie prepared, more work until they literally couldn't see anymore, then collapse and do it again. On the 8th night, Wade found Leanne sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing. He sat beside her without speaking. "I'm worried," she said finally. "About the hearing?" "About what happens after. Even if we win, Hale won't stop. He'll find another way to come at us." She looked at her bandaged hands. "And I keep thinking, maybe everyone's right. Maybe I am the problem. If I wasn't here, your life would be simpler." "Simpler ain't better." "Wade, you remember what you told me after the storm? You said we'd have to start actually living instead of just almost dying." He took her hand carefully, mindful of the cuts. "Well, this is living. It's hard and it's scary, and there's no guarantee it works out. But it's real. It matters. And I'd rather have this, have you, and fight for it than go back to that empty existence I had before." Leanne leaned her head on his shoulder. "You're very stubborn." "You're just figuring that out now?" She laughed softly. "No, I've known since day one. I just keep hoping you'll become reasonable." "Don't hold your breath." They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies emerge in the darkness. Wade noticed Miguel's family packing up their wagon, getting ready to head home for the night. The man had worked 12-hour days for a week straight, asking nothing in return. "Why are they helping us?" Wade asked. "Miguel barely knows me. The Washingtons don't know me at all. Why do they care? Because they understand, Leanne said. They know what it's like to be outsiders, to have people decide you don't belong before you even open your mouth. When they see us fighting to stay, they see themselves. They see their own battles. So we're fighting for more than just us. We've always been fighting for more than just us. You just didn't realize it. Wade thought about that for a long time after Leanne went inside. All those years he'd spent isolated, convinced his problems were his alone. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe every fight against injustice, every refusal to back down to bullies, every choice to stand up for what was right, even when it was hard, maybe all of that mattered to more people than just the ones directly involved. It was a heavy responsibility, but also a strangely comforting one. On the 10th day, Vernon Hale himself appeared. Wade was working on the north fence when he spotted the expensive horse and well-dressed rider approaching. He set down his tools and walked to meet Hale at the property line. Mercer. Hale stayed mounted, looking down. Power play. Place is looking better. That the only reason you came? To inspect my property? I came to make you one final offer, because I'm a generous man, and I can see you've been working hard. Hale pulled out a leather folder. I'll buy the ranch from you for a fair price, 20% above what you paid for it. You can take your money, take your woman, and start fresh somewhere else, somewhere people won't judge you. And if I say no, then we go to the hearing and I bury you. I've got 3 lawyers working on this case, Wade. They'll bring witnesses who'll testify about your declining mental state. They'll present evidence of property neglect going back years. They'll paint a picture of a man who's lost his grip on reality, who's making dangerous decisions because of grief and loneliness. Hale leaned forward in his saddle. And that Chinese woman? They'll make her sound like a con artist who's taking advantage of you. By the time they're done, the territorial judge won't have any choice but to declare you unfit. Wade's jaw tightened. You really think you can lie your way to stealing my land? It's not lying if it's based on truth. You have been neglecting this place. You are involved with a woman society deems inappropriate. Those are facts. Hale straightened. I'm offering you a dignified exit. Take it. No. Wade, I said no. Now get off my property before I forget you're too old to punch. Hale's expression hardened. You're making a terrible mistake. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. After Hale left, Wade stood there shaking with rage and fear. Because everything Hale had said was true, he had neglected the ranch for years. He was involved with Leanne. And a good lawyer could absolutely make those facts sound damning. Leanne found him an hour later, still standing in the same spot. Miguel said Hale was here, she said. He made an offer. Buy us out, we leave quietly. What did you say? What do you think I said? Wade turned to face her. I said no. I'll always say no. But Leanne, he's not wrong about the hearing. They can twist the truth into something ugly, make me look unfit, make you look like a criminal. And I don't know if we can fight that. Then we get our own witnesses, our own evidence. Leanne's voice was firm. We show them what this ranch looks like now, not what it looked like before. We bring Miguel, the Washingtons, Annie, people who can testify that you're perfectly sane and that this property is well maintained. They'll ask about us, about our relationship. So we tell the truth. Wade stared at her. The truth is that I'm in love with you, that you sleep in my house, that we're whatever we are. You think a territorial judge is going to look at that and see it as anything other than improper? Maybe not. But lying won't help either. They'll see right through it. Leanne stepped closer. Wade, we can't control what they think. We can only control what we show them. And what I want to show them is 2 people who are building something real, something worth protecting. Let them judge us. At least we'll go down honest. It was possibly the worst legal strategy Wade had ever heard. It was also the only one that felt right. All right, he said. We tell the truth. The last few days before the hearing passed in a blur. The ranch came together like Wade hadn't seen in years. Fences solid, buildings repaired, even the house looking almost welcoming with curtains Leanne had made from old fabric. Mrs. Washington's seedlings had taken root, creating rows of green that promised future growth. Miguel had taught Wade a new technique for water management that would help during dry months. Annie had organized all the household supplies in ways that actually made sense. It wasn't perfect. The barn still leaned slightly, Some of the fence posts were crooked, the paint was peeling in places. But it looked like what it was, a working ranch run by people who cared about it. The night before the hearing, everyone gathered for a meal. Annie cooked, Leanne helped, and they all crowded around Wade's table eating and talking like this was normal. Like people from different backgrounds sharing food and friendship was the most natural thing in the world. "You nervous about tomorrow?" Miguel asked Wade. "Terrified." "Good. Means you care." Miguel refilled his coffee cup. "My father used to say that the only battles worth fighting are the ones that scare you. The easy fights don't change anything." "Your father sounds wise." "He was. He also died broke and broken, so maybe wisdom isn't everything." Miguel smiled sadly. "But he died free. Nobody owned him. That counted for something." After everyone left, Wade and Leanne sat on the porch one more time. Tomorrow would determine everything. But tonight, they had this. "Whatever happens," Leanne said, "I want you to know I don't regret any of it. Coming here, staying, falling in love with you. Even if we lose everything tomorrow, this was worth it." Wade pulled her close. "We're not going to lose." "You don't know that." "No, but I choose to believe it anyway." They stayed like that until the stars came out, holding each other against the uncertainty of tomorrow. The territorial courthouse in Cheyenne was a squat brick building that smelled like old paper and older grudges. Wade and Leanne arrived early, flanked by Elias and their witnesses. Across the room, Vernon Hale sat with 3 lawyers in expensive suits, looking confident. The judge was a lean man in his 50s named Blackwell, with iron gray hair and eyes that gave nothing away. He called the hearing to order and Hale's lawyers started immediately. They presented documents showing years of declined property maintenance. Photographs. When had they taken photographs? Showing the ranch at its worst. Tax records showing late payments. Testimonies from townspeople claiming Wade had become erratic, antisocial, possibly dangerous. Then they called their star witness, Dr. Edmund Price, who'd apparently treated Sarah during her final illness. "In your professional opinion, Dr. Price, what was Mr. Mercer's mental state after his wife's death?" "Severely depressed, possibly suicidal. I recommended he seek ongoing treatment, which he refused." The doctor looked at Wade with something like pity. "I believe the isolation has only worsened his condition. People in that state often make poor decisions, latch onto inappropriate relationships as a form of self-medication." "Inappropriate relationships. Could you elaborate?" "Well, I understand he's now living with a Chinese woman, unchaperoned, which suggests impaired judgment." "Objection?" Wade stood up before he could stop himself. "I ain't on trial here. My property maintenance is." Judge Blackwell looked at him. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer. You'll have your chance to speak." Hale's lawyers continued for another hour, building their case brick by brick. By the time they finished, Wade felt sick. They'd made him sound like a lunatic and the ranch like a disaster zone. Then it was his turn. Elias went first, testifying about Wade's character and work ethic. Then Miguel, talking about the improvements made in recent weeks. Mrs. Washington spoke about the garden restoration. Annie testified about the house's condition, but Wade could see Judge Blackwell's skepticism. Recent improvements didn't erase years of neglect. Character witnesses didn't address the core question of fitness. Finally, the judge looked at Wade. "Mr. Mercer, do you have anything to say in your own defense?" Wade stood. His prepared speech evaporated. Instead, he told the truth. 5 years ago, I lost my wife, and I gave up. Stopped caring about the ranch, stopped caring about myself, just went through motions waiting to die. That's all true. And yeah, the property suffered because of it." He took a breath. "But then I hired Leanne Hua. And she didn't just work hard, she made me remember why this place mattered. Why building something is worth the effort even when it's hard. She saved this ranch, and she saved me. Mr. Mercer, the court isn't interested in your romantic, this ain't about romance. This is about what makes a property worth maintaining. Mr. Hale's lawyers want to paint me as crazy because I fell in love with someone society don't approve of. But the real crazy thing would be throwing away someone who makes me want to be better, who makes this ranch thrive instead of just survive." Judge Blackwell was writing something. Wade couldn't tell if that was good or bad. "As for fitness," Wade continued, "look at the evidence both sides presented. Yeah, the ranch was failing, but it ain't failing now. We fixed it, we're maintaining it, and we'll keep maintaining it because we both give a damn. That's more than a lot of property owners can say. He sat down. Leanne squeezed his hand under the table. Judge Blackwell was quiet for a long time, reviewing documents. Finally, he looked up. This is a complicated case. On one hand, there's clear evidence of years of property neglect. On the other hand, recent improvements suggest current competent management. He steepled his fingers. Mr. Hale, your petition for seizure is denied. However, Mr. Mercer, you're being placed on probationary status. The territory will conduct property inspections every 3 months for the next year. If standards slip again, this case will be reopened. Understood? Wade felt like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. Yes, Your Honor. As for your living arrangements, that's your business, so long as the property is maintained. Court dismissed. They'd won. Barely, conditionally, but they'd won. Outside the courthouse, Hale was waiting. His expression was cold. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. Wade met his eyes. You threw everything you had at me and it wasn't enough. Go find someone else to bully. You think you're safe? You think winning one hearing changes anything? Hale stepped closer. I own this territory, Mercer. The bank, the merchants, the law. They all answer to me eventually, and I will make your life so difficult that you'll beg me to buy that ranch. Then I'll beg, but I still won't sell. Hale left, and Wade stood there shaking. Not from fear. From relief so profound it felt like collapse. Leanne was beside him immediately. You did it. We did it. What now? Wade looked at the sky, at the town, at the woman beside him who'd given him a reason to fight. Now we go home, and we keep living. They rode back to Red Hollow Ridge with their witnesses, arriving just after sunset. The ranch looked beautiful in the fading light, imperfect but honest, a place that had survived against odds. Everyone celebrated briefly before heading to their own homes. Miguel clapped Wade on the shoulder. Mrs. Washington hugged Leanne. Annie promised to visit again soon. And then it was just the two of them standing in the yard of a ranch that was finally, truly theirs. I'm scared, Leanne admitted. Hale meant what he said. This isn't over. No, but we're still here, still standing. Wade took her hands. And that's enough for tonight. She kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. When they broke apart, she smiled. Welcome home, she said. Welcome home, Wade echoed. And for the first time in 5 years, he meant it. The first snow came early that year, dusting the ridge in white by mid-October. Wade woke to find Leanne already up, standing at the window watching flakes drift down like ash from a cold fire. Beautiful, she said without turning. Deadly, too. If this keeps up, we'll have a hard winter. We'll manage. We always do. It had become their refrain over the past month. Every challenge, every setback, every reminder that Vernon Hale hadn't forgotten his promise. They met it with stubborn determination and the words, we'll manage. But managing was getting harder. True to his threat, Hale had made life difficult. The bank suddenly required full payment on a loan Wade had been making installments on for years. Patterson's prices climbed even higher. Ranch hands who'd been friendly started crossing the street to avoid Wade in town. Small acts of sabotage appeared with increasing frequency. Broken fence wire, gates left open, supplies that went missing from the barn. Nothing Wade could prove. Nothing that would hold up as evidence. Just a steady campaign of pressure designed to break him. We need to talk about winter supplies, Leanne said, moving away from the window. We're short on feed. Patterson's charging twice the going rate, and the dealer in Cheyenne won't deliver out here anymore. Hale got to them. Obviously. So what do we do? Wade had been asking himself the same question for weeks. The answer kept coming back the same. They were losing this fight 1 inch at a time. Not dramatically, not all at once, but through attrition. And eventually, they'd have nothing left. I'll figure something out, he said. Wade, I said I'll figure it out. Leanne's expression tightened, but she didn't push. That was part of the problem. They'd both been holding back, trying not to add to the pressure the other was already under. But the unsaid things were piling up like snow, and eventually the weight would become too much. Later that morning, while Wade was repairing yet another section of mysteriously damaged fence, Elias rode up looking troubled. We got a problem, the old man said without preamble. What else is new? This is different. There's talk in town. People saying the ranch is cursed, that bad luck follows anyone who helps you. Elias dismounted stiffly. Miguel's wife is sick. Nothing serious, just a fever, but folks are saying it's because he worked your property. Mrs. Washington's chickens stopped laying. People are calling it an omen. Wade stabbed his shovel into the frozen ground. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Stupid or not, people believe it. And they're scared. Elias pulled out his tobacco pouch with shaking hands. The cold. Or something else. I tried to hire some men to help you with winter preparation. Offered good money. Nobody would take it. They're all too afraid of what hail might do, or what bad luck might follow them home. So we're completely isolated. Looks that way. Elias finally got his cigarette lit. Wade, I hate to say this, but maybe it's time to consider Hale's offer again. Cut your losses while you still can. There's no shame in... Yes, there is. Wade picked up his shovel. There's shame in letting bullies win. There's shame in running when you could have stood. And there's shame in teaching the world that cruelty works if you're rich enough to afford it. That's pride talking. Maybe, but it's also principle. Wade drove the shovel into the ground with more force than necessary. I ain't leaving. Neither is Leanne. If that means we freeze to death alone on this ridge, then that's what happens. Elias studied him for a long moment. You really love her that much? This ain't about love anymore. It's about what kind of man I am. What kind of world I'm willing to accept. Wade met his eyes. You asked me once if I was willing to lose everything for her. The answer's still yes. But it ain't just for her. It's for everyone who's ever been told they don't matter because they're different. Everyone who's been pushed around by people with more money and power. If I give up now, I'm telling them all that the bullies are right. That's a hell of a burden to carry. Yeah, well, someone's got to carry it. Elias left shaking his head and Wade went back to work. But the old man's words stuck with him. They were losing. Slowly but surely, they were being crushed. He just didn't know how to stop it. That evening, Wade found Leanne in the kitchen staring at their dwindling supplies. Her notebook lay open, covered in calculations that clearly weren't adding up. We have enough food to last until December, she said. Maybe January if we ration carefully. After that, she didn't finish the sentence. Wade sat down heavily. I've been thinking about asking Miguel if he knows anyone who'd sell us feed under the table, or maybe riding out to some of the farther homesteads, people Hale don't have influence over. That's days of travel, in snow, and it might not even work. You got a better idea? Leanne closed her notebook with a snap. Yes. We go see Hale ourselves. We negotiate. Absolutely not. Wade, listen. No, I ain't begging that bastard for anything. That's exactly what he wants. He wants us desperate enough to come crawling. Then what? Leanne's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. We just sit here and starve? Watch the animals die because we're too proud to compromise? It ain't about pride? Yes, it is. It's entirely about pride. She stood up, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You want to make some grand statement about principles and standing up to bullies, but Wade, we can't eat principles. We can't feed the horses on standing up. At some point, survival matters more than being right. So I should just give up everything I've fought for? I'm saying you should be smart enough to know when you're beaten. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cold. Leanne looked immediately horrified, but she didn't take them back. Wade felt something crack inside his chest. You think I'm beaten? I think we're both beaten. I think we've been fighting a war we can't win, and instead of admitting it, we keep pretending everything's fine. Leanne's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. I'm tired, Wade. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of pretending I'm not terrified every single day that this is all going to collapse. And I'm tired of watching you destroy yourself trying to protect me from a world that will never accept us. So what do you want me to do? I want you to be realistic. I want you to stop treating this like some heroic last stand and see it for what it is. A fight we're losing. She grabbed her coat. I need air. She left before Wade could respond, the door slamming behind her. He sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by calculations that didn't work and supplies that wouldn't last, and felt the weight of it all crushing down. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had been treating this like some grand moral stand when it was really just stubborn pride leading them both to ruin. Maybe the smart thing, the right thing, was to admit defeat and find a different way forward. But the thought of giving Hale that satisfaction made Wade physically ill.
He found Leanne an hour later, sitting on the porch steps in the falling snow. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy with cold and tears.
Wade sat beside her without speaking. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I shouldn't have said that." "You meant it, though." "Parts of it, not all of it." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I'm not sorry we fought. I'm sorry we're in a situation where fighting seems like the only option. What if it is the only option? What if compromise means losing everything that matters?" Leanne was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "My husband used to say that, that compromise meant losing, that standing firm was the only way to maintain dignity." She looked at Wade. "And then he died standing firm, and I spent 2 years learning that dignity doesn't keep you warm at night. It doesn't feed you when you're starving. It's just a word people use to make suffering sound noble. So you think I should give up?" "I think you should consider that there might be a third option, something between surrender and self-destruction." She took his hand. "We could leave, Wade. Not because Hale won, but because we chose to. We could take what money we have, go somewhere new, start over where nobody knows us. Somewhere we wouldn't have to fight just to exist." Wade wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that leaving was the same as losing, that starting over somewhere else wouldn't solve anything. But looking at her tired face, her hopeful eyes, he couldn't. "Let me think about it," he said. "Okay." They sat together in the snow, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage but couldn't quite figure out how to build something that would last. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Wade was feeding the horses when he heard multiple riders approaching. His hand went to his rifle before he recognized Sheriff Bradshaw at the front of the group. Behind Bradshaw were Miguel, the Washingtons, Annie Fletcher, and about a dozen other people Wade recognized from town. Some he knew by name, others just by sight, all of them carrying supplies. "What's this?" Wade asked. Bradshaw dismounted. "This is people who are tired of watching Vernon Hale run roughshod over this territory. We took a collection, got you feed, flour, salt, everything on Leanne's list from last month." "How did you—" "Annie told us what you needed. We all pitched in." Miguel was already unloading sacks from his wagon. "You think you're the only one who's tired of that man's bullying? Half the families here have been squeezed by him at one point or another." Mrs. Washington climbed down from her wagon with her husband's help. "We've been talking among ourselves. Figured if Hale can organize against you, we can organize for you. Seems only fair." Wade stood there, overwhelmed. Leanne emerged from the house, stopping short when she saw the crowd. "I don't understand," Wade said. "Elias told me people were scared, that they thought helping us was bad luck." "Some people think that," Bradshaw said, "but more people think that letting Hale win is worse luck. For all of us." He started helping unload. "Besides, Miguel's wife is already getting better, and Mrs. Washington's chickens started laying again yesterday. Turns out bad luck is just coincidence, and people will believe anything when they're scared." Over the next few hours, the group unloaded enough supplies to see the ranch through winter. They worked efficiently, organized, like a community that had decided something important. As people prepared to leave, Miguel pulled Wade aside. "You need to understand something. This ain't just about you. Hale's been using you as an example, trying to show everyone what happens when you don't follow his rules. But every time you survive, every time you don't back down, you show the rest of us that he ain't invincible." Miguel squeezed his shoulder. "You're fighting our fight too. Don't forget that." After everyone left, Wade and Leanne stood in the barn, surrounded by enough supplies to actually make it through winter. The impossible had just become possible. "I was wrong," Leanne said quietly, "about being beaten, about there being no way forward." "You weren't wrong to be scared. Hell, I'm terrified." Wade pulled her close. "But maybe we don't have to figure this out alone. Maybe that's what I've been getting wrong, thinking it's just us against the world, when really it's us with people who care against one man who doesn't. That's still bad odds." "Yeah, but they're better odds than we had yesterday." The territorial inspector came in November as promised. He walked the property with a critical eye, checking fences, examining buildings, reviewing Wade's maintenance logs. Leanne had insisted they keep detailed records, every repair, every improvement, every dollar spent. The inspector spent 3 hours examining everything before finally signing off on his report. "Property is well maintained," he said. "No concerns at this time. Next inspection in February." It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. One more hurdle cleared. One more way they'd proven they belonged here. December brought the kind of cold that made your breath freeze in your lungs. Wade and Leanne settled into winter routines, morning chores, maintenance work, evening meals by the fire. The isolation that had once felt suffocating now felt almost peaceful. They talked more during those long, dark evenings than they had in all the months before, about childhoods and dreams, mistakes and regrets, about Sarah and Chen Wei, grief and survival, about what it meant to love someone after loss when you knew exactly how much it could hurt. "I used to think loving again was betraying my husband's memory," Leanne said one night. "Like I was saying he didn't matter enough if I could move on. What changed your mind?"
You did. The way you talk about Sarah, with love, but not like she's still here, like you honor what you had without pretending you can get it back. She shifted closer to him on the couch. That helped me understand. Loving you doesn't erase him. It just means I'm still alive, still capable of feeling something besides grief. Wade kissed her forehead. Sarah would have liked you. She had no patience for weakness, and you're the strongest person I know. I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, mostly. Christmas came and went quietly. They exchanged small gifts. Leanne had made him new work gloves. Wade had carved her a small wooden box for her notebooks. Nothing extravagant, but chosen with care. On Christmas evening, someone knocked on the door. Wade opened it to find Elias standing there with a bottle of whiskey and a sheepish expression. "Figured you two shouldn't spend the whole holiday alone," the old man said. They drank and talked and played cards until late, and when Elias left, Wade felt something shift. The ranch wasn't just a place he was defending anymore. It was becoming a home again. January arrived with brutal storms that kept them mostly inside. Wade used the time to do something he hadn't done in years. He started building things from wood. Small projects at first. A new shelf for the kitchen, a step stool for Leanne to reach high cupboards. Then bigger things. A proper table to replace the rickety one they'd been using. Chairs that didn't wobble. Leanne watched him work with quiet amusement. "I thought you said you weren't a carpenter." "I'm not. I'm just a rancher who's making furniture." "You're good at it." "Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised. I always knew you had it in you." She ran her hand over the smooth table surface. "You just needed a reason to try." By February, the worst of winter was passing. The second territorial inspection came and went without incident. The inspector even complimented them on the new furniture. Spring arrived slowly, tentatively, like it wasn't sure it would be welcome. But the snow melted, the ground softened, and Mrs. Washington's seedlings from the previous year burst into life. Wade and Leanne planted a real garden this time, not just survival crops, but vegetables Sarah would have grown. Tomatoes and beans and squash, things that took time and care and faith that you'd be around to harvest them. One morning in late March, Sheriff Bradshaw rode up with news. "Hale's dead," he said without preamble. Wade set down the fence post he'd been working on. "What?" "Heart attack, 2 days ago. He was at his desk going over paperwork and just stopped." Bradshaw dismounted. "His family's fighting over the estate. Looks like his ranch is going to be split up, sold off to pay debts. Turns out he wasn't as rich as everyone thought. He'd been leveraging everything to buy up more land." Leanne had come out of the house, drawn by the conversation. "What does this mean for us?" "Means your biggest enemy is gone. Means the pressure's off." Bradshaw looked between them. "Also means the bank's going to be more willing to work with you now that Hale's not breathing down their necks. I'd suggest going in this week and renegotiating that loan." After Bradshaw left, Wade and Leanne just stood there, trying to process it. "We won," Leanne said slowly. "Not because we beat him, just because he died." "Yeah, that feels wrong somehow. Like we should have had some final confrontation, some moment where we proved ourselves." Wade thought about it. "Maybe that's not how real life works. Maybe there's no grand finale, just survival long enough for circumstances to change." He took her hand. "We didn't beat Hale, but we outlasted him, and maybe that's what winning actually looks like." They went to the bank the following week. The new manager, Hale's replacement, was far more reasonable. They restructured Wade's loan with better terms, longer timeline, lower interest. Without Hale's influence poisoning everything, doors that had been closed started opening. Patterson's prices came down. The dealer in Cheyenne started delivering again. People in town nodded to Wade on the street instead of crossing to avoid him. It wasn't acceptance exactly. The stares didn't stop,
The whispers continued, but the active hostility faded into background noise that was easier to ignore. Through it all, Wade and Leanne worked. They expanded the herd, improved the buildings, made the ranch into something that could actually turn a profit. It was hard work, endless work, but they did it together. One evening in May, as they were finishing dinner, Leanne said something that stopped Wade mid-bite. "I want to marry you." Wade set down his fork. "What?" "I want to marry you, properly, with witnesses and documents and everything legal." She was nervous. He could see it in the way she twisted her napkin. "I know it won't be easy. I know people will talk. But I'm tired of hiding what we are. I want the world to know you chose me, that I chose you, that we're building a life together." Wade stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. "Leanne, are you proposing to me?" "Yes." "Is that a problem?" "Only problem is you beat me to it. I was going to ask you next week." He kissed her. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in June, outside on the ridge with the ranch spread out below them. Elias performed the ceremony. He had some kind of official capacity from his years as a circuit preacher. Miguel and his family came. The Washingtons, Annie and her daughter, Sheriff Bradshaw, even a few townspeople who'd slowly become allies. It was small and imperfect and exactly right. Lynn wore a simple dress she'd made herself. Wade wore his best shirt and pants, the ones without patches. They exchanged vows they'd written, promising not perfection, but partnership. Not eternal happiness, but shared struggle. Not an easy life, but an honest one. When it was over, when they'd signed the documents and accepted congratulations, they stood together watching the sun set over land that was finally, legally, theirs together. "You think we'll make it?" Leanne asked. "Long term?" "I think we'll fight like hell to make it. Can't promise more than that." "That's enough." The years that followed weren't easy. There were bad seasons and good seasons, lean times and prosperous times. The territorial inspector kept coming every 3 months for the full year, then switched to annual visits when it became clear the ranch was thriving. Wade's loan got paid off. The herd grew. They hired help. Not many, just a couple of ranch hands who needed work and didn't care about who was running the place. Some people in town never accepted them. Patterson went to his grave convinced they were a scandal. But others slowly came around, or at least stopped actively opposing them. Wade built things in his spare time, furniture and tools and small structures that proved you could start something new at any age. Leanne kept her meticulous records and turned the ranch into a model of efficiency that other homesteaders started copying. They fought sometimes. About money, about priorities, about stupid things, like how to organize the pantry. But they always came back to each other, because neither had forgotten what it felt like to be completely alone. 5 years after that first storm, Wade stood in the garden watching Leanne work. She was teaching a young couple, new homesteaders who'd come seeking advice, about crop rotation and water management. She moved with confidence now, none of the tentative carefulness she'd had when she first arrived. Elias appeared beside him, older and grayer but still kicking. "You did good, Wade." "We did good. Couldn't have done it without help. That's the lesson, ain't it? We're all stronger together than we are alone." Elias pulled out his tobacco pouch. "Sarah would be proud of the ranch, of you, of what you built here." "You think?" "I know. She always said you had more in you than you showed, just needed the right person to pull it out." Elias lit his cigarette. "Leanne did that, but you had to let her." Wade thought about that. About how easy it would have been to send Leanne away that first day. How many times he could have given up. Could have chosen isolation over connection, safety over risk. How close he'd come to losing everything because he was too afraid to admit he needed help. "You know what I learned?" Wade said. "Being strong ain't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to hold on and when to reach out. When to fight and when to accept help. When to protect what you have and when to risk it for something better." That's wisdom talking. Nah, that's just survival. You live long enough, you either learn those lessons or you die stubborn and alone. That night, Wade and Leanne sat on their porch, rebuilt and reinforced, a proper porch with railings and everything. The ranch spread out before them, healthy and whole. Not perfect, but theirs. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked. "Coming here? Everything that happened after." Leanne leaned her head on his shoulder. Every single day. Wade stiffened. What?
I regret not coming sooner, not finding you years earlier. All that time we both spent alone when we could have been together.
She squeezed his hand.
But I don't regret a single thing from the day I arrived to now, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. They proved we could survive anything. We're not done surviving yet. World's still full of people who think we're wrong. Let them think what they want. We know the truth. She turned to look at him. We're not wrong. We're just inconvenient to people who want the world to stay small and divided. And inconvenience isn't the same as immorality. Wade pulled her closer. When'd you get so wise? When I fell in love with a stubborn rancher who taught me that sometimes the right thing is also the hard thing, and that hard things are worth doing anyway. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged overhead, same stars that had watched them struggle and survive, fight and forgive, break and rebuild. The ranch house glowed with warm light behind them. The animals were fed and safe. The land was maintained and productive. And two people who'd been told they didn't belong had built a life that proved belonging isn't something you're given. It's something you create through stubborn determination and refusal to accept the limits others place on you. Wade realized that this was what Sarah had wanted for him all along. Not to die with her, but to live after her. Not to preserve her memory by staying frozen in grief, but to honor it by becoming someone capable of loving again, of building again, of risking again. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For showing up. For staying. For fighting when it would have been easier to run. For making me remember I'm alive. He kissed her temple. For saving me. We saved each other, Leanne corrected. That's how this works. Nobody saves themselves alone. And that, Wade thought, was the real truth at the heart of everything. People like to tell stories about lone heroes, solitary fighters, individuals who conquered the world through sheer will. But real survival, real strength, real victory, those things were always shared, built together, earned through trust and mutual support and the willingness to be vulnerable with someone else. He'd been the ghost of Red Hollow Ridge, too broken to live and too stubborn to die. And she'd been an outsider with nowhere to go and no one to trust. Separately, they would have failed. Together, they'd built something neither could have imagined alone. The world hadn't changed its mind about them. Society still had its rules and prejudices. There were still people who whispered when they rode to town, who shook their heads at the scandal of it all. But those people no longer mattered. Their opinions couldn't touch what Wade and Leanne had built. Not just a ranch, but a partnership, a home, a life worth defending. You know what's strange, Leanne said. I spent 2 years after my husband died just trying to survive each day, never thinking past the next meal, the next night, the next crisis. And now I find myself thinking about next year, next decade, growing old here with you. That scare you? Terrifies me. In the best way. She smiled. Because it means I have hope again. And hope is the most dangerous thing a person can carry. It makes you believe in futures that might not exist. Makes you risk everything for something that's not guaranteed. But it's also what makes us human. What separates living from just existing. She stood and pulled him up with her. Come on, we've got an early day tomorrow. They went inside together, leaving the stars to their eternal watch. The ranch settled into night sounds, wind through grass, animals shifting in the barn, the creek running over stones, sounds of life continuing, persisting, refusing to stop just because the world was hard. And somewhere in town, in farmhouses and homesteads scattered across the territory, other people were finding their own ways to survive. Some of them looked to Wade and Leanne's ranch as proof that outsiders could make it. Others still saw it as an aberration, a mistake waiting to collapse. But all of them learned the same lesson eventually. The world changes not through grand revolutions, but through small, persistent acts of courage. People choosing connection over isolation, love over fear, hope over resignation. Wade and Leanne weren't heroes. They were just two broken people who'd found each other and decided that brokenness didn't mean worthlessness, that being damaged didn't disqualify you from happiness, that the scars you carry can become sources of strength if you let them. Years later, when people asked Wade what he'd learned from everything that happened, he'd think for a long time before answering, because the lessons weren't simple or easy. They couldn't be reduced to platitudes or inspirational sayings. But if he had to choose, he'd say this:
We tell ourselves stories about independence and self-sufficiency, about standing alone against the world. But those stories are lies. Real strength comes from admitting you need help. Real courage is letting someone see your weakness and trusting they won't destroy you with it. And real victory isn't defeating your enemies. It's surviving long enough to outlast them while protecting what matters. The ranch on Red Hollow Ridge stood for decades after that brutal winter. It passed through different hands eventually, as all things do. But the people who lived there always felt something in the walls, something in the land itself. A sense that this place had been fought for, that love had defended it against hate, that two people had decided belonging was worth creating, even when the world insisted they didn't fit. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew right, you could almost hear them, the ghost rancher and the woman nobody wanted, laughing together on the porch they'd built, proving that some hauntings aren't about death at all. Some hauntings are about life persisting against all odds, about love refusing to be erased, about hope surviving long enough to become reality. That was the real story of Red Hollow Ridge. Not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but something better. A human story about flawed people making brave choices. About falling down and getting back up. About finding someone worth fighting for and deciding that together you could face anything. Because in the end, that's what we're all searching for. Not perfection, not ease, just someone to share the struggle with. Someone who sees our damage and stays anyway. Someone who makes the hard days bearable and the good days extraordinary. Wade found that in Leanne. Leanne found it in Wade. And together, on a ranch that almost died, they built a life that proved the simplest, most powerful truth of all. We survive together. Or we don't survive at all.